Welcome to the Security DNA podcast powered by SecurityInfoWatch. Steve Lasky, a seasoned veteran of the security industry with over 35 years of experience. Today, Steve welcomes Dr. John D. Byrnes, the founder and CEO of the Center for Aggression Management. Established in 1993, John created the Critical Aggression Prevention System, or CAPS. This includes the scientifically validated Primal and Cognitive Aggression Continua, tools designed to identify early behavioral warning signs so organizations can intervene before situations escalate into violence, harassment, bullying, or discrimination. John is also a U.S. Navy veteran who served aboard the first nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Nautilus. Through the Center for Aggression Management, John provides training, consulting, software, and technology solutions that help organizations prevent aggression, discrimination, insider cyber incidents, and other forms of harm. He is also the author of several books on aggression prevention and developed the NABITA Threat Assessment Tool, which is now used on more than 177 college campuses nationwide. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
I want to welcome you to Security DNA. And, you know, as we look at this, traditional security measures have repeatedly failed to prevent devastating acts of violence in our schools, workplaces, and public spaces across society. So in this podcast, we want to dive into the Critical Aggression Prevention System, which is your groundbreaking approach to workplace and community safety. We want to explore how CAPS shifted the paradigm from reactive crisis management to proactive prevention, helping organizations identify and stop aggressive behaviors before they escalate into incidents like bullying, harassment, and violence. Your innovative system also represents a unique opportunity for systems integrators to offer a fresh product to their clients, which is great. One that's distinctively different from traditional electronic security measures, which will allow them to focus on behavioral precursors for a more holistic safety approach for their clients. And unlike biased or subjective tools, CAPS uses objective, measurable observables to detect sequential precursors to aggressive behavior with scientific reliability. So, John, welcome, and let's dive in.
Steve, it's a pleasure to be with you. We've been talking for decades, and it's about time we had the opportunity to do a podcast together. So it's an honor for me to be here.
It's a pleasure is all ours, John. I appreciate that. You know, when you and I talked, I'd asked you for some topics that we wanted to discuss. I want to talk about the challenges of the current safety methods that are on the market today. And, you know, when we look at some of these, like traditional electronic security, there are some obviously some limitations in reliably preventing violence and harassment before they occur. So how often do traditional methods fail to prevent serious incidents? And what are common patterns or root causes tied to those failures? And then I want to get into how your system is an alternative.
Absolutely. Steve, it actually shocks me when I talk to CPPs, people that are highly educated in the area of security, and I make a statement to them, and well, here, let me share it with you. I asked them, conflict resolution, isn't that a method of preventing escalation and violence? And they all nod affirmatively, as you are now. Then I say, but doesn't conflict resolution presuppose conflict? And you think about it, yes, it does. Sure. It presupposes conflict, so you're already at risk. So because we have humans who will express their conflict with violence, we're seeing that on college campuses, we're seeing on urban streets all over the US. These are people who are in conflict, who are expressing that conflict with violence. If you truly want to prevent violence, don't you have to get out in front of conflict? And there's a pause, and then you see them nodding. Yes, they're getting it. So so what are we doing? We're reacting. But the same scenario occurs, sexual harassment. Doesn't that represent someone exhibiting sexual harassing behavior? Abusive behavior, discrimination discriminating behavior. And all of these, bullying in our schools is pervasive. But aren't we reacting to people already in bullying? You already have a victim and you already have a perpetrator. Well, that was a revelation that I had 30 years ago. So with that said, these systems are also punitive, aren't they? They're designed to identify an offender and punish that offender. So this is the reason why everybody gets on edge when you're collecting data, because they're afraid that if someone is accused, then they're going to be punished. And therefore, who is that first aggressor going to be looking for once they're punished? For the person who called it in. The person, this is one of the reasons why see something, say something is not reliable.
Right.
We know that humans tend to do what they perceive is in their best interest, right? They don't see it in their best interest to get involved for this reason and many more, so they don't. So see something, say something. Another reliable method that's supposed to be out there is not working. It's not reliable. So all of these systems that we're set up for, which include all of them, the most egregious of all, Steve, is the active shooter response training. Think about it. Doesn't that presuppose an active shooter already murdering your employees?
It's a little after the fact.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're reacting to everything that is out there. That was
and security, and that's part of the issue. I mean, security is, for the most part, always been a reactive function. Never, proactive, and we don't take situational awareness cues into assessing what our risks are and how, and then coming up with a valid way to mitigate them. So let me start from the beginning here, because a lot of people don't know you and don't know what the Center for Aggression Management is. So give us just a brief overview on the impetus for starting the Center for Aggression Management, and then kind of segue into what critical aggression prevention systems are.
Absolutely. Many of you in security may be familiar with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, Pulitzer nominated for his book On Killing. After he left, he was a psychologist at West Point. After he left there, he formed the Killology Research Group. This man goes all over the world teaching law enforcement and security and military about the psychological effects of killing. Well, he, along with a guy by the name of Bruce Siddle, who's in the security side, he was the one who trained all the first TSA people, the 50,000 initial TSA people. They got together and they created this concept, or they defined this concept, peer-reviewed, so that was based upon identifying the difference between aggression, the production of adrenaline, the increase in the heart rate, and the resulting body language and behavior that we can both identify visually, but we can measure it. When I was working with the military, Steve, we were using infrared. And if we can get a square inch of skin, we could identify a person's pulse rate remotely and watch it go up and down based on the stimuli. This is hard science. And that became the first component in CAPS called the Primal Aggression Continuum. But because this is based on the adrenaline rush, right? We realize that this represents someone losing control. The higher on the scale, the more loss of control. But what about conscious deliberate aggression? It didn't fit, because throughout my life, I've always gone on the predicate that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right?
Sure.
So here's primal aggression, which I can measure. And when I was working in the military, we were actually using the pulse rate as an identifier. So I searched the universe to identify conscious deliberate aggression. Came upon a professor in Austria. He developed what he called a conflict model. It was academic, it was convoluted, but it was well-researched, peer-reviewed. So I simplified it, put alongside of primal aggression, and called it cognitive aggression. Because, Steve, cognitive aggression is built upon intent. Not
Right.
just intent, but the intent to do harm to another human being. So we can call that hostile intent, we call it malicious intent or malintent for short, but it is the intent to do harm to another person. When I put these two together, suddenly, for the first time, suddenly all of the body language and behavior that we've known about since the beginning of human history fell into place and became empirical, which led me 10 years ago to take this to Eastern Kentucky University and get it scientifically validated as reliable, which gives you that one of the questions to, answers to one of your questions. So we put these two together and it started to give us a full continuum. We're watching primal aggression, we're watching cognitive aggression, but also how they interact with each other. They're inexorably connected. So a person, as they escalate, isn't just primal or cognitive, they're a combination of both.
Right.
But what drives them is what's important to us. Because what drives them is important to identify so we can better engage with that person and diffuse. Okay? This is primal aggression, built on the primal instincts of fight or flight. It is fueled by adrenaline. The higher on the scale, the more loss of control. And again, represents someone losing control. So what do we expect to see in the extreme? That red-faced, ready-to-explode guy. Lovely image, isn't it? Then we found the cognitive aggression. This is conscious, deliberate aggression or non-conscious in that someone repeats it so often that they become a vicious person. They no longer give a lot of thought and they become vicious or even evil. This is fueled by intent, the intent to do harm to another person. So we simply ask the question, and we'll get into the mechanics here very simply. What is your intent with this person? Is it in your interest and theirs, therefore a win-win as it ought to be? Or is it in your interest and to their detriment? In other words, you're going to victimize this person. You're becoming a victimizer. Now, Steve, this is way below the radar. Nobody's seeing this kind of behavior, but this is often an inconsiderate person who doesn't see themselves as an aggressor, but they're creating victims. So they are aggressors, right?
Is that akin to passive aggressive behavior, except on a more violent scale?
Yes. It is the lowest levels of aggression. Now, this is important to understand as well. The difference between assertive behavior and aggressive behavior. Assertive behavior says, I'm going to win because I'm going to be the best version of myself.
Right.
Aggressive behavior says, I'm going to win because I'm going to take you out, right?
Right.
However, in our society, we have a false positive. We think that there's good aggression and bad aggression, right? Go out and be aggressive. Aggressive negotiations, aggressive athletes, right? But if that's the vision you're taking, where does good aggression end and bad aggression begin? Because of that lack of understanding, we have a boxer who bit off another boxer's ear, right? We have basketball players who are throwing chairs in the stands. Football players are shooting, killing other people. Why? Because they don't know where that distinction ends and the bad aggression begins. So we make it very simple for society. We say there's assertive behavior and aggressive behavior. So by doing so, an important element, an important realization comes forward. If I can move Johnny, an aggressor, he's going down an aggressive path. My challenge is to convince Johnny that he's on a path that he is not going to like. He's got consequences he's not going to like. Remember, humans tend to do what they perceive as in their best interest, right? So I'm going to convince Johnny that he's on a path that is going to have consequences he's not going to like. But then I redirect. This is a key element to our system. We're going to convince Johnny that there's another path for him, a separate path, an assertive path that addresses his issues, but doesn't have those consequences. Now,
so is this how you differ from established tools for aggressive assessment?
It is one of the ways.
All right. What are some of the others?
Well, I mean, the whole idea that we're able to identify aggression well before it actually becomes conflict.
Okay.
So that in itself is an element. But here we're actually convincing Johnny to go down an assertive path. What does that do for security in their industry? What it does, Steve, is once Johnny's on this new path, and now he's not on this new path because I told him to be on this path. He's on this path because he doesn't want to have those consequences. What have we just done? We've taken him off the aggressive path. He is not going to escalate. He is not going to become violent. So we have prevented, let me use that word again, prevented, not proactively, we have prevented any subsequent escalation and violence. That is huge in the industry. When I presented last to As Is, I had a horde of people come up, directors of security, vice presidents of security, owners of guard companies, say to me, John, the most daunting day of the year for me is when I have to go before a CEO or worse yet, a CFO, or go before my client and convince that person that the money being spent on me and my team is worthwhile. Because I'm forced to prove a negative, right? I'm forced to prove nobody's died, therefore it's all worthwhile. That's a hard thing to prove. And when all the other departments are giving you evidence-based practices and giving you the, demonstrating value, and you're unable to, other than this nobody's died business, it doesn't work. We're actually able to provide evidence-based results that we've actually prevented these elements of aggression, not just violence, but also sexual harassment, abuse, bullying, discrimination, and these other types of behaviors that are not even seen in most cases. So our ability to get up in front and prevent them is the key.
Right. And, it's interesting too, because I think one of the things that your system allows is for the engagement for other higher ups in the organization. So let's talk a little bit about how CAPS works in practice. So what is the typical workflow or the process for deploying CAPS in an organization? Who observes the behavior? How are observations recorded? And how are interventions triggered?
Excellent. We train two kinds of people. Our system, the CAPS system, involves three different elements. The first two are training. The third is software.
Okay.
We can train all people with all skills, and some clients want that, and we're happy to do it. But most want a two-tiered system. So we train what we call aggression first observers. These are people on the front lines of aggressive behavior. They see it all the time. These are your receptionist. These are in a hospital setting, that information desk, everybody has to walk by it. These are your security, HR, mental health people. These are people that see it all the time. We teach them objective, measurable observables. Now, Steve, these aren't these subjective references like scary, strange, weird, and menacing that take you down a rat hole of he says and she says. These are objective, measurable observables of human-based aggression. And they put that information into an app. That's all we want them to do. Observe, report. That's all we want them to do. Then the second level of training are we call certified aggression managers. These are individuals who are trained to engage and do what we just talked about with Johnny the aggressor, to convince this Johnny, this aggressor, that the path that they're on is not in their best interest, that there's a far better path, an assertive path, that will help them address their issue, but doesn't have those consequences. Every time we do this, we have prevented any subsequent escalation. We're actually able to demonstrate with evidence-based results for that CEO, CFO, or client that we're actually saving them money because we don't have these costs. Now remember, if you have a victim, as we discussed, all current programs have a victim and a perpetrator. If this victim may be affected for a lifetime, if the perpetrator has done enough that they have to be terminated, now the employer has a legal cost. They want to cross their T's, dot their I's before they terminate. So that's a cost. Then they have security. Many of these already have their own, but if they don't, they're going to have to hire. And for how long? Then you have to replace this person. You have to hire a new person. That can be very expensive. And then depending upon the hierarchy of this person, you'll have to train this person. All of those costs can add up to as much as 5 times a person's salary. It's horrendous. We save all of that by getting out in front of conflict, bullying, abuse, discrimination, and violence. We save all of that money for an employer.
And those are music to security directors' ears for sure. But, a question when we're looking at your method is the scalability of CAPS. Obviously, when the discussions we're having here seem to be tailored more towards the enterprise, larger institutions like universities and corporate campuses. But what about the application of CAPS in, say, small workplaces, public spaces, or community settings like neighborhoods or civic centers?
Absolutely. We're actually talking to one individual who's trying to develop a program he calls block by block. And he's trying to go out to that on a more of a local level. Yes, we have this on a corporate basis. So if you have 5, 10 employees or more, we can do it on that basis. But we also have an individual app for an individual person that wants to go, and we have the training for it. We actually have what the First Observer and Certified Aggression Manager course. The First Observer is a half-day online training, and require its instructional design. It's for adult learning, so you're assessed all the way along, and then at the end you're assessed up to an 8. You have to get an 80 or plus passing rate. Now, we haven't had anybody not pass it, but if you have difficulty, you get 5 tries. The Certified Aggression Manager training is a bit more involved. Further from the First Observer it's a 1-day training online, 7 hours. And again, you pass an exam because we need to know that people are competent at using these skill sets. And because this is founded in science, which we can go into more detail about, because it's founded in science, it doesn't require a lot of degrees behind your name or a lot of years of experience. We can teach this to ordinary people, and they can use it effectively along with their app and their dashboard. Again, we can go in that more detail, but it makes it a very easy to implement either on a small or a very large scale. We're talking. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We have a hospital system, 23 hospitals we're trying to work through right now. And each hospital is going to have their own dashboard. Then we'll have an overarching dashboard that can see everything below it. So we have the ability to go scale very large and very high, or we can have a simple 5-man operation that have simple individual apps and access to the knowledge. And we also do what we call the Aggression Prevention Masterclass. This is a course you can take that has both the First Observer and Certified Aggression Managers course. So if you're an individual and you really want to learn how to operate it and be effective with it, you can take that course as well.
Interesting. I'm sure some of the folks that are listening to this are wondering how effective CAPS is in preventing non-physical forms of aggression like harassment and bullying, discrimination and emotional abuse, because we've talked about the violence. What about these non-physical forms of aggression?
Great question. And this graphic that we have up right now helps us identify there very quickly. You'll notice here that on the right side, we have the primal aggression continuum. On the left, we have the cognitive aggression continuum. And once again, a person isn't either primal or cognitive, they're a combination of both. And we're trying to identify what's driving this. Is this more someone losing control, or is it someone who's doing this in a manipulative, controlling sort of way, the cognitive aggression? Because that enables us to better approach these people using different methods. Now, so let's go to the bottom of this scale to start with. On the primal aggression side, we have triggers. Triggers are little explosions that go off in our heads. We all experience them. You get up late. You go in for coffee and breakfast. There is none. Now your stomach's grumbling. You got 3/4 down the driveway, and you realize it's garbage day and you forgot the garbage. You jam on the brakes, grab the garbage cans. Now you get into traffic and someone cuts you off. These are all triggers we all experience. The difference is we cope, Steve. As long as we're coping, everything is copacetic, right?
Right.
But when we stop coping, when one trigger begins to build on top of the next trigger, we enter into what we call the escalation phase and what we term mounting anxiety. Why? Because it changes us. It changes our body language. It changes our behavior. It changes the way we communicate with each other. And we can identify these changes early on. Now, these are way below the radar, but they become essential in different functions that we have. The next thing you're going to see, and again, on the cognitive side, we already talked about the difference between assertive behavior and aggressive behavior. Assertive behavior is cooperative. It's mutual. It's finding common ground. Aggressive behavior, you're starting to disconnect. You're starting to go your own way, separating from the mutual benefit to your own benefit. So we start to see even these very subtle movements as someone begins to escalate. And that in part begins to answer your question. But we also see there's a low risk, a moderate risk, and a high risk. Why? Well, in the case not far from where I live in near Walt Disney World, home of Mickey Mouse, was the Parkland shooting.
Right.
Nicholas Cruz, there were 45 calls made on Nicholas Cruz's bad behavior to the school district, to the local sheriff's office, and even to the FBI. And no one seemed to feel the sense of urgency to be involved enough with this young man to have prevented this from happening. And that is a problem throughout the industry. Now we're talking about system-wide issues. So how does this change the equation? Well, because first of all, as you can see, this is progressive. So you can see someone go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. And when they go from 3 to 4, they're not only going from 3 to 4, but they're going from low risk green to moderate risk yellow. And the reporter of this can see that if they do nothing, then they could be at risk for not reporting it. But even more important than that, if you identify someone in stages 1, 2, and 3, when it is the easiest to engage and redirect them, and you don't, this person could become a 7, 8, or 9, and you could become a victim. So now they have the impetus to be involved, where before they weren't. Now they're beginning to see it in their best interest to be involved, and they do. And I've seen that repeatedly occur over time. Now, the next thing I want to share with you is what we were just talking about earlier. You were asking me about measures. Well, conflict. These are all what I generally speak to as maladaptive behavior. Conflict, sexual harassment, abuse, bullying, discrimination, and even excessive force, a concern to security, all begin at the 4th stage of cognitive intent-driven aggression. Now, why is that so important to know? As we've already pointed out, conflict resolution presupposes conflict.
Right.
So we're reacting to it. And because if we want to be preventative, we have to get out in front of conflict, and none of these things do that. But we have something special. Here goes to your answer. The precursors. The ability to identify stages 1, 2, and 3, which are prior to even an incident occurring, gives us the ability. Now, these, again, way below the radar. Under most, they don't even looking for these things. We're teaching people how to identify them, how to engage and redirect them, even before they become conflict, sexual harassment, abuse, bullying. So we can actually demonstrate that we're preventing these things from occurring. Can we rely? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You paused. I thought you were moving on.
I want your question so we can go further. But can we rely 100% on body language and behavior? And the answer, of course, is no. We can't. So we've developed what we call the judicious interview.
Okay.
The judicious interview uses scientific cause and effect principles, Steve. In other words, we ask specific questions or we take specific action that produces a predictable result if someone's intention is to harm. Now, this is very important. There are other programs that are getting out, like Primal Aggression, the famed Paul Ekman. I actually had the honor of being in his living room one day, talking to him about cats. But Primal Aggression, we can identify it early on, but and there are other programs that are sort of similar, but not quite as well defined as ours. But literally nobody else has cognitive aggression, intent-driven aggression. And that gives us an ability that we're not only able to identify, but we're able to affirm. That's important. Ability to affirm that this person is being aggressive and at what stage or level they are, so we can apply the corresponding skill sets so as to maximize our result without ever being declared excessive force. Why? Because we're staying within the system.
John, you kind of segueing on that
Sure.
Line of discussion. Are there documented cases or longitudinal data that exist showing reductions in incidents of violence, harassment, and bullying in organizations that you've worked with using the CAP system?
Great question. When we got this scientifically validated as reliable at Eastern Kentucky University, we took a nationally known incident reporting system and we put the CAPS system on top of that.
Right.
And generating. So there at Eastern Kentucky University, after 2 years of application, the head, Dr. Claire Good, who is both the vice president of student affairs and, the chair of the SAT team, the student assistant intervention team, wrote that she was very pleased that, in fact, what the meter of emerging aggression, which is our central analysis tool that says, yes, someone's being aggressive and they're at this level, was that their team was in a complete agreement with both the evaluations and the results they produced of the CAP system over a 2-year period. And that meets the scientifically reliable thing for the APA regulations. So that's, yeah.
You go ahead. Go ahead.
So that's how it's scientifically validated. Now, we take this to the next level, the crisis phase.
Right.
And what do we expect on the primal aggression side? Again, this is someone losing control. So what do we expect to see? We're expecting to see someone spiraling out of control into panic and or rage. Can this person be lethal? Of course. But typically, this is not a premeditated event. This is someone who's losing control. Someone comes home from work early one day, finds their spouse in bed with their best friend, the weapon's on the table, they shoot and kill both people. That's not premeditated. That's adrenaline-driven aggression. Before we get into cognitive aggression, we should stop just a moment and talk about executive protection, because that's a big part of the business, right?
And it's a big part. It's a big topic and top of mind discussion right now.
Absolutely. I've had the honor of working with real legends in executive protection, Jerry Glazebrook, Bob Dugan of ESI, and all of that. So one of the things I've learned from all of that is that they, like the federal government, believe that prevention is identifying someone planning or preparing for an attack. I'm sure you've heard that phrase, planning or preparing for an attack. Well, Steve, that's 7, 8, and 9 for us. They're missing 6 through 0. So that's why they continue to react. Now, cognitive aggression. We identify someone becoming tactical. Now, when I say tactical, former military law enforcement, you tend to think this is well thought out. It can be. But most typically, this is someone who has identified their target and they're committed to the destruction of that target. That causes them to demonstrate body language and behavior and communication indicators that we can identify, just as we did earlier. So starting from the top, working down, we have the 9th stage cognitive aggressor, the perpetrator of murder-suicide or terrorist. Or when we talk about all our veterans that are committing suicide, we're also talking about a suicide here as well. We can identify someone who's approaching that stage. Once again, I often tell security and law enforcement, you do not want to approach a 9th stage cognitive aggressor in uniform. Why? There's a high probability they will instantly start shooting, because it is their cause and purpose to give up their life for a cause. We see this all the time. Someone goes in, shoots a bunch of people, and then shoots themselves, or suicide by cop, right? So that's 9th stage cognitive aggressor. 8th stage is the perpetrator, is the murderer or combatant in a military sense, who is prepared to give up their life for a cause, but intend to survive. So they take that changes their behavior. They'll avoid security so they can better complete their mission. The 7th level, we call the complicit tactician. Completely complicit with the 8th and 9th level. They want certain people to die, but they're not going to kill them, nor are they actually going to put themselves that much at risk. Why? Because they're going to inspire other people to do it, like the late Osama bin Laden, or a terrorist handler, or in a domestic sense, someone helping with logistics, an accomplice. Each is a precursor to the next. It may only give you moments, Steve, but it gives you the ability to get out in front instead of waiting for that horrific moment of commitment. That moment of commitment is when an assailant decides to pull that weapon and start shooting. From that moment to when the first round is discharged is just 2 seconds. No security, no law enforcement, no matter how well trained or equipped, can be on scene in 2 seconds. Steve, I spoke to the director of operations for NASRO, the National Association of School Resource Officers. I asked him, can you have any reliability at all that your SROs can be on scene in 2 seconds? He said, absolutely not. So he invited me to the next conference. Steve, we had to push SROs out the door because the room could not contain all the people that wanted to be in that room. They want this. They just need it desperately, and they don't have it. Now, that's 7, 8, 9. Here's the key. There's 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and a 0 baseline. And no matter where you are on this good planet, because we don't ask the question, what is your culture, gender, education, age, sexual orientation, religion? We're not asking any of those questions. We're not asking for mental health assessments or psychological evaluations. Why? They're too subjective. They're notoriously inaccurate because of it, and they can violate HIPAA. So we don't use them. This is what changed our perspective. You were wondering, why has this come up so differently than anything else? Because we started with a simple aggressive behavior, primal and cognitive. And we began to build it on that. It took us down this path that literally nobody else is seeing and is producing results that literally nobody else has.
This is fascinating stuff, John, and we're going to have to leave it there for today since we've run out of time. But I will get you back, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to put part 2 together on this. So as we wrap up today's conversation, I guess the message that stands out clearly here is that traditional security measures and technology are no longer enough to meet the threat we're facing. So what we've explored with you today in the critical aggression prevention system is a fundamental shift in thinking from reacting to violence to preventing it before it begins. And I guess the CAPS challenge is that it makes us look beyond hardware and towards human behavior. It makes us identify or help us identify objective, measurable precursors to aggression. And organizations can now have an opportunity to intervene early and de-escalate situations and protect people in a way that that are both ethically and legally sound. So It's not about bias or profiling, as you just discussed. It's about awareness, training, and scientific accountability. So, I mean, to me, this is just remarkable stuff. And, there's really something in it for everybody here, from system integrators to security leaders, educators, HR professionals, community stakeholders. Everybody can take away a powerful message that safety is just not what we install. It's about what we recognize. So I think that's a fascinating approach to this.
And what's important here too, Steve, is that we're not competing with anybody out there. We're augmenting what they already have. We can add to what people are watching through videos or locking systems and security professionals. We work with them to augment what they have.
Excellent. Hey, I want to thank Dr. John Byrnes for sharing his insights, and thanks to our audience for joining us today. Until next time, stay safe, stay proactive. And we will have Dr. Byrnes back with us in short order, I'm sure.
Well, Steve, thank you. And thanks to Dr. Byrnes for this compelling conversation about his groundbreaking approach to workplace and community safety. To access our podcast lineup, go to podbean.com and search for Security DNA. You can find our podcasts in our Security Frontline, Integrator Newswire, and Security Week e-newsletters. Of course, we'd love your feedback from our listeners about topics that interest you. This episode of the Security DNA podcast was recorded and produced by me, Rodney Bosch, Editor-in-Chief of Security InfoWatch. For Steve Lasky, Dr. Byrnes, and everyone at Security InfoWatch, thanks for listening, and keep an ear open for our next podcast.